All right. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Ezra Klein. My background and most of my work is in politics, so I spend a lot of time hanging out with people making the world a little bit worse. So it's always nice to be around people making the world a little bit better. And I'm thrilled to be joined up here by Sarah Young, the General Manager of Plant-Based Proteins at Morningstar Farms, by Chuck Muth, the Chief Growth Officer at Beyond Meat, and by Patty Trevino, the Senior Vice President of Marketing at CKE Restaurants.
Hi, everyone.
And this is a panel that is a little bit strange in its construction because it's all about how do you market plant-based foods to meat eaters. And so I wanted to start, if I could, by getting some data. What percentage of the folks in each of your organizations buying the plant-based products, so two of you make plant-based products and you sell at least some, are meat eaters? And what percentage do you think are vegetarian or vegan? And
I get to start. So, hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I think there's one true vegetarian vegan on my team.
No. But I mean in terms of sales.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What percentage of the people buying Morningstar's products are vegetarian or vegan?
So about 17% of our sales comes from vegetarian vegan consumers, while the rest comes from what we call people seeking to have a flexitarian lifestyle. And 6% of the total population is said to be vegetarian vegan. So the real opportunity is going after the people that are actually trying to reduce meat. Earlier today, I talked about 54% of consumers are actively trying to reduce meat in their diet. 75% are open to it. And so there's a huge opportunity to get more people into this category.
So 17.
Yes.
Chuck?
Well, first, thank you for not asking me the square root of 6,749 or something. No, we actually have that. There's an inside joke. We did say that in the back room. The actual answer to that is we did pull some scan data, register ring data from the largest retailer in the U.S., and we know that 93% of the consumers buying our product are actually buying meat at the same occasion. So we know a high propensity of consumers are buying our product, are also meat producers or flexitarians. And a large part of that is likely because of how we merchandise it in the grocery stores. We're actually merchandising it in the meat counter next to other animal meats and giving an option to consumers to choose our product that they like, and unfortunately many are. We do have a line that sells in the vegetarian section, our crumble business. I don't have data on that. I assume it's significantly less because that's more in the vegetarian vegan section. And as far as food service area, I don't have actual data, but I just read something recently. I think something like 80% of the consumers buying plant-based products in QSRs are in fact meat eaters that are looking for alternatives, at least occasionally, to an animal-based diet.
Hi, everyone. For those of you that don't know, CKE Restaurants actually owns Carl's Jr. and Hardee's. I know it just said CKE.
Which I grew up on.
Carl's Jr.?
Yeah, my whole teenage years were like built on your Crisp cut fries.
They're delicious. Like Chuck said, the majority of the burgers that we do sell are sold to meat eaters. When we started looking at data of the Beyond Famous Star, the product actually has mayonnaise and cheese, but at our restaurants you can actually customize. So out of all of those burgers, 25% are customized without mayo and without cheese. So we don't have the exact number, but we do see that 25% of those products are sold without any dairy.
So I expected that these numbers would be not 100%, but I will say they are much lower than I would have anticipated. 17% are vegetarian or vegan. 90-some% are eating meat. We don't know, but probably significant.
Yep.
You were saying that the motivation there is to reduce meat.
Yep.
When you do the market research, why do people want to reduce meat consumption?
I think there's, the research would suggest there's three big vectors that why they want to reduce meat. One is overall health, right? Some vector of health. The other is the environment. And then finally, there's animal welfare, and health far outweighs that in terms of prominence.
Chuck, one of the senses I get from Beyond is that you actually don't want that to be the reason. That the hope is not that just people want to replace meat or reduce meat, but the hope is that people who are fine with meat actually just want Beyond more, that it's a more premium product, that it is somehow outpacing meat in the consumer's mind. I'm curious if that's correct? And if so, what are the leverage points?
Yeah, I don't really think that's correct. I mean, we're a mission company at the end of the day. I mean, most people who work in our company, including our founder who leads our company, started this as part of a mission. I mean, we do believe in the same things that Sarah just talked about, and that we think that that's a significant issue, particularly around the environment today, and I'll add a fourth element, land resource. I mean, we know that 30% of the world's non-ice land mass is used to raise animals for food. We know that 25% of the world's fresh water is used to raise animals. It's a very inefficient way to feed the world. And as I think the projection I saw latest was, that animal meat industry is going to grow 80% over the next 30 years, largely because of growing population, but also because of the developing world's developing more wealth and getting more westernized centric diets. That's just not a sustainable model. What's going on in the Amazon right now is horrific, and it's a horrific situation that is driven by the need to provide more land for cattle to feed people. I mean, it's just not a sustainable model.
Sorry, I'm going to ask this question more clearly, because I recognize that you guys do want meat consumption to go down. When I've spoken to folks at your company, they make a point of saying the way you market your product is not based on trying to convince people they should eat less meat, but it's trying to convince them that what you have for them is better than meat. And in terms of the consumer behavior, you're trying to create something that even if you're fine with the amount of meat you eat, you would choose it over it anyway, that it's better in taste, it's better in flavor. And I'm curious about that positive push. I'm curious about what are the leverage points for taking somebody who has not decided they want to have less meat in their diet, but just have them make a consumer choice to your product anyway.
Yeah. So let me rephrase that. So that is the underlying factor. But the reality is that we don't think that being negative on meat is a great way for us to market our products. We know that meat is an essential part of many people's diet. It's helped our brains develop. It's there. So what we're trying to do is develop products that don't feel like a sacrifice. We say, love what you eat. That we can make something that doesn't feel like a sacrifice, but actually does do the things that we've just talked about. The big issue today, as you probably know, is price. Price and the amount of ingredients that are involved and sodium and things like that. So we have a number of initiatives to reduce that. We're looking to reduce sodium. We're looking to reduce saturated fat. We're looking to make it taste better and more meat-like, okay? And we're also looking to bring price down. So we know that price is a huge barrier in our industry right now. And so, we have a number of initiatives to actually make it. We believe within 5 years, or one of our mandates is within 5 years, we will be cheaper to make animal meat.
Patty, what was the impetus for CKE to make the jump into plant-based products now? Why not 5 years ago? Why not 10 years ago? What was the data?
Do you want to tell the story of how it happened?
Yeah, sure. You tell it.
So it's actually an interesting, fun story. It probably was a little less than a year ago. I think it was September, October. You guys came to our office.
That's right.
So, Carl's Jr. specifically, we've always been kind of known to be at the forefront of protein innovation, whether it's launching an Angus burger or turkey burger. And our CEO said, I'm bringing these guys from California. They're the founder of Plant-Based Product. And we're like, okay, the CEO wants us to go to a meeting. Let's just all go. It's one of those. You're like, the CEO calls, you go. So, Ethan walks in, Chuck walks in, and they're like, we're this company, we really believe in this, shared their vision, their mission. And it came down to, I think for me, one thing was that they were seeing the future of where protein was going. But more importantly for us, the product was delicious. And when they came in and had all of their different variety and they built our burgers utilizing their protein, we were just in awe. And I think that's one of the critical things when we made the decision to partner with Beyond was making sure that the quality and the flavor came through. Because ultimately, we can talk about health and we can talk about, it's gonna take a lot of education for the majority of consumers to understand what the benefits are of a plant-based protein. It has to always come down to, does it taste great? That's what it is. It's like, it will always come down. So product was delicious. A CEO and Ethan are having this love affair of a conversation of, well, this is great, we can do all these wonderful things. And, I talked to the CEO and like, okay, well, let's make this happen. This is a great product, we gotta go to first to market. This feels like Carl's Jr., we're innovative. And we told Ethan, it's like, okay, how quickly can you guys make this happen? We probably want to get it done at the end of the year. And he's like, okay, well, how many restaurants do you want to test in at the end of the year? I'm like, no, we want to roll this out at the end of the year. And it was, he basically said, you guys are crazy. And, but that's what we do. And we partnered, we worked hand in hand with the team at Beyond. Our culinary team went out there making sure that the product that they produced for us delivered on all the quality, the spec, the size. I mean, all of that's important. Does it cook through our charbroils? But yeah, it was a great partnership, and we got it done. We got it done in 4 months, and I actually spent some time early on in my career working at Burger King and doing product development for them. And one of the benefits of working for Carl's Jr., where we only have about 1,000 restaurants, is the scalability of we could move that quickly with a partner like Beyond. And I think that's one thing that you all, for those of you that are trying to get your products into retail or restaurant chains, is making sure that you have the right foundation and the right processes to build scale without impacting the quality of your product. Because that's one critical thing that we looked at when we chose to partner with Beyond.
Chuck, I'd like to hear about the scaling question actually from your end. 1 year ago, I was at this conference, and Ethan from your company was on the panel. And at that point, people were slitting each other's throats in Whole Foods to get the Beyond sausage, right? It was like a Mad Max fight for your sausage. And a year before that, it was very tough to get the Beyond Burger. So scaling at that point seemed like a problem. And then a year later, you're in 1,000 Carl's Jr.'s, and what happened behind the scenes to ramp up production so aggressively?
Well, and by the way, what Patty was saying was actually great learning for us. So it was, Carl's Jr. allowed us to figure out what it's going to take to scale at that level, and as bigger QSRs are coming on, we have a lot of it now have more experience in doing that. We had, last summer was the summer from hell, candidly. We didn't anticipate the demand that we saw. It was just outside of what you could imagine. And we have very little data points because this is a really new space, it's a new category, there's not a lot of data out there, so you're a little bit on the fly in this thing and trying to figure it out. And we just didn't have enough capacity built in to be able to scale at the rate that we were asked to do. But we learned a lot from that, and as we learned that, we have hired. I will say also, it's a smaller startup company, which just 2 years ago when I went there, that we were literally an $18 million company. We were a very, very small company, and we needed to bring in some of the expertise that is needed to move from a very small scale company to a very fast-growing, larger scale company. And so we brought in new talent. I mean, we opened up a lot of co-packing partners as we needed to do to scale. You can't build your own facilities fast enough, so you have to do that. So that was a lot of the way we were able to, I think, get into a better place in 2019. Although our businesses continue to grow at a very rapid rate, we're actually able to keep up at this point.
Sarah, as you mentioned this morning, Morningstar is category leader here.
Yep.
And is one of the original players here. And there's obviously been some transformation of this market, at least in consumer perception, in the last 5 years.
Yep.
What has it changed about your approach? I'm sure there have been a million meetings inside Morningstar of like, what is happening?
Yeah.
What are the bullet points that come out of those meetings? What do you think has happened, and what is going to be different for you guys going forward, or already is?
What Patty said in the beginning is taste is paramount, continues to be a rising theme throughout all of these meetings. Consumers have awoken, but they will only buy if the product tastes delicious. So in all these meetings, we continue to come back to we need to have the best tasting products that we can. The second point is there's a consumer resurgence or insurgence of interest in this category. It is also about breadth of offerings and portfolio. And so we're really lucky at Morningstar Farms. We have a great breadth of portfolio offerings that goes across occasions, day parts, and we take that very seriously. And we also look at what are other ways you can bring consumers in, and what does that food format look like?
So one of the things that I've observed, and maybe wrongly because I do not make consumer-facing products in that way, is that there's been a big push among some of the newer players here for what you almost might call social validation, like associational partners. So Impossible began by rolling out with David Chang and other foodie chefs. Beyond was very intense, that you could not put the Beyond Burger in the vegetarian foods case. It had to be packaged like meat in the meat case. Now there's the work of partnering with Carl's Jr. or the Impossible Whopper or KFC. And it seemed to me all these efforts have tried to work on building a partnership between someone you would not expect to be working with these products. What have you guys taken from that? Is that something you're interested in?
Yeah, so we have a huge food service business as well, right? We're in over 25,000 college and universities, hospitals, government, and restaurants, chains throughout the US. In addition to coming back to the mission of making plant-based protein accessible, we take this retail and this breadth of retail very seriously and making sure that our products are distributed widely to bring consumers in and making that easy for them to access plant-based proteins.
On the, in Carl's Jr., why is the way you guys decided to go to create a specific burger that has a Beyond Patty instead of making the Beyond Patty an option on all burgers?
Actually, it is an option in all burgers.
Then
so
never mind. But there is,
but I'll share.
but there is a specific branding.
Yeah, I will share a story because that is a conversation that we had, I think, for 48 hours, because that's how fast it was. No, so we decided to actually put the product and do a line extension of one of our core products, which is the Famous Star. We decided to go that way and also position, hey, let's put something on the menu that shows you can swap out any patty for a Beyond for X amount. And believe it or not, people love, at fast food especially, they just love the known. Don't tell me. That's why there's numbers on combos. There was really little movement of having the patty switch, and everybody just wanted the Beyond Famous Star. So I think it depends on the organization and the category. But in fast food, consumers just love the ease. It's just part of the industry. But we do have that option. So, but we see little movement of it. But we are looking in the short term of bringing in more bills utilizing the Beyond Patty. So just coming to your Carl's Jr. in the near term.
A build being one of these
A new product, a new burger build will be introduced in a few weeks.
But I love your jalapeno with the Beyond Burgers.
Yeah, it's actually. I mean, you guys should feel free to swap any Carl's Jr. burger with the Beyond Patty. It's delicious.
So to talk about the unfamiliar side of this, right now where a lot of the category is what you might call mimicry, right? The Beyond Burger is like a burger. The Morningstar chicken nuggets are like chicken nuggets. When I talk to the folks inside the companies, they will often tell me that the place they think this will eventually go is into evolution. That we are going to get good enough at building plant-based proteins, at building cell-based proteins, that you can create things that don't currently exist. And that is where you are actually able to pass meat. That is where you are able to go to the consumer and say, we can give you something meat actually, animal-based meat cannot. So I'm curious, and Chuck, I'll start with you. 10 years from now, what kinds of things are we seeing at this conference? Do they all look like things we know, or are we starting to see things we don't know? And what are the first things we don't know?
Yeah, first of all, it's a great question. I hadn't really thought about it. I know this, though, that the one advantage that we do have in the industry is that we can continue to innovate. It's very difficult to innovate an animal-based product. That innovation will, well, as you can imagine, if it's an animal highly consumed product today, whether it's bacon or steak or if you name it, we're going to be, at some point, we or others will attempt to replicate it. That's the easy mark, right? Because it's accepted, it's a market for it. But doing innovative type, which is your question, and I don't know if I have a real good answer right now. Yeah, I think that's possible. I think if there's some of the things we could do that are interesting, that that will be commercially viable in the marketplace, I think that's a very good possibility. Yeah.
Sarah, come on. 10 years from now, what is one thing I'm seeing that doesn't, literally doesn't exist? It's been imagined into creation.
I think one thing that you're seeing that doesn't exist is your point on health and what is next generation. And it's all of you in this room that are innovating in next generation protein sources and the health benefits that go along with that. Like we said, we can't innovate in the same way in meat, but the innovation that is going on in next generation protein sources will enable different level of health benefits, the positive that you spoke about earlier, into the food.
Like what?
You said you weren't going to do stumpers.
What's the square root of 2,000?
Again, you guys all in this room know better than I do. I think something about the trends in gut health, the point on disease resistance, all those types of positives, benefits will come back into the food.
And the other side of how people eat is identity. We've talked a little bit about what they want from their food, but there's also what their food says about them.
Yes.
So I grew up with Carl's Jr. advertising, and I know there's Green Burrito and others, but Carl's Jr. is one I grew up with. And I remember the campaign where like all the mats had a bullseye target in it because the burgers were so messy that the question was like,
Yep.
where would they drip? What are the identities there was an identity around that of like big, gut filling, like a man's burger. What are the identities that are valid here that can work in the advertising that you're trying to key into as you build market share in the space?
Yeah, I think it goes back to it's partnering with like Beyond and other vendors that we have that are true to what we stand for as a brand: indulgence, taste, flavor, juiciness. You come to Carl's Jr., whether you get a plant-based burger or you just get a beef-based burger, you're going to have the same experience. And I think that's, again, one of the critical points. And I think the other piece with identity and, for me, the future is stopping to use the labels of vegetarian, flexitarian. I think in 10 years, I'm hopeful that people will just be open to any protein. And, assuming that our share is going to grow because we're going to target flexitarians, I think in 10 years, people are just going to naturally, adopt plant-based protein as part of their menu or, what they eat. I always think about organic milk. It's just 20, 30 years ago, it was one aisle, maybe one brand. Now it's the majority. And you look at the shelf space of what it used to be, 20, 30 years ago. And that's what I feel is going to happen is just people are just going to stop using labels to target their consumer and saying, we got to go after these people. And really it's about showcasing that this is not for a specific target or a specific audience, it's for everyone. So for me, it really is about looking at plant-based protein in that way versus building a product or building some type of burger that's going to target a specific market. It's like we've got to build something that everybody will love, no matter what protein we use. And I think in 10 years, that's kind of what I think is going to happen. I think it's just we've got to make sure that we stop labeling people and targeting people that way.
On the question of labeling, can you guys still hear me?
Yep.
We're back. On the question of labeling, Chuck, how worried is Beyond about some of the regulatory efforts in different states to say you can't call a plant-based burger a burger?
It has to be a concern because it's out there. We know that there is, particularly the Cattlemen's Association has been very proactive. I think the dairy farmers too, very, very proactive in the labeling. We don't think it's constitutional. We think our lawyers are, we feel confident that these laws will either be overturned or defeated. However, we're taking an approach of actually working with the states. I mean, we've reached out to the states to have conversations with them to talk about what's so confusing about what we're doing. So far, we haven't had to make any changes. If it ever came down to it, we're going to call it Beyond Patty or something. I mean, and people are going to know what it is because it's becoming big enough. It's not a small brand anymore, so people know what to see, what they expect, what the visuals look like. We're having problems not just in the U.S., by the way. The U.S. is actually not as proactive right now as we're facing in places like Canada and Europe and other places where they're making it very challenging to do business there. And again, a lot of it is politics, and it's the PACs, and it's the cattlemen associations. It's interesting in Canada, which is a really great country for us, but the reality is that there are some roadblocks there, in spite of the fact that they've just changed their dietary guidelines to increase, plant-based foods. Yet another faction of the government is, playing, to some of their constituents in the cattlemen, for instance. So,
Can for those of us who don't know that situation as well, like me, what are some of the roadblocks that are beginning to emerge in Canada or Europe?
Well, in Canada, for instance, you have to have a fortified product. So we actually have to change the ingredients to go to Canada. You have to add vitamin Bs and things like that to make it replicate meat in that sense, which makes it challenging. In Europe, for instance, we just were challenged, having our cow with a cape on there, even though it's part of our trademark. They're saying, well, that's confusing the consumers because you're essentially saying you're a cow. Just last night, I was talking to someone from South Africa who said that when we put meteor on there, well, you can't justify that meteor in some way, and well, it's not meat, but it's not animal meat anyway. But those are the type of things that there are. It's government. You're on the politics side at one point. It's politics too. It is who contributes the right money and gets the right audience and the right ear and has the right, member of Congress or whatever to support these type of things. And it's unfortunate. I mean, it should be pure competition. We're not in any way, and I don't think anybody in our category is trying to confuse consumers. We say plant-based right on the label in very big letters. It's not a confusing conversation. So I'm not sure, well, we know why they're doing it. It's about competition.
And who do you find to be your allies in this fight? Obviously, other companies, Morningstar and Beyond and Impossible want the same things here, but who are the potentially unexpected allies as you're trying to build coalitions to push this stuff back to pure competition?
Well, it's interesting because we get allies on both the right and the left. I mean, in the right side, it's like free speech and things like that, or on the left side, it's free speech, things like that. On the right side, it's not telling people what to do and not being competitive, so creative. So we are getting support from, I honestly think these laws are not going to pass ultimately because there is a lot of support among both Republicans and Democrats in the U.S. to not do that, not enforce that type of, labor requirements. Actually, meat producers, there are a number of meat producers today. We talk about like Tyson and so forth, and the Tyson's here. They're ambiguous, I think, about it. I mean, they're not, I don't know if they're supporting what we're doing, but they're certainly not fighting against it either. They're just joining the fight, and they're joining the game. I mean, they're getting into the brands. So they're not, that's maybe a little bit surprising that we hadn't seen. It's one thing, the farmers, though, that's the one thing, I think it's kind of on the fence, but in a lot of ways, we are actually going to make the farmers more profitable because we are much more efficient use of their land. So there are farmers that are supporting some of these initiatives because, again, they're supporting the cattlemen, but the reality is that long term, we're actually going to make the farmers more profitable.
On this question of the international scene, Sarah, what kinds of growth opportunities does Morningstar see internationally? And I'm a little bit more interested here in developing markets and developed ones.
Right. Okay. So first, Morningstar just launched into Canada earlier this year and will be in New Zealand by the end of this year and Australia after that. That does not answer your developing market question. There's a lot of work that we're still evaluating from a consumer and product and just total pipeline as well as, food formats like you spoke about earlier. So we're still doing quite a bit of evaluation globally.
And it particularly seems, if there's this increasing association, though, between these companies and fast food and others, that there's been a paved way there. I mean, if you go to Brazil or you go to India or you go to China, maybe this is a question, I guess, as much for Chuck. KFC is huge in China. So if there was a successful KFC partnership that scaled up, that would seem to be one way you could enter markets that maybe you don't already have a lot of expertise in.
Yeah, we're fast becoming a global brand, and we're in 51 countries today. We're not in China, we will be there soon. So it's a good point. So there are the national QSRs. Carl's Jr. has a good presence throughout the world in the Middle East and in Europe. And and there's a lot of interest from those QSRs to enter those countries. And they give us a foundation, they give us a base, and they also give us some learnings that we need to have in those countries. So it is really, really helpful to be a partner with them.
As you guys have looked at the data on the sales, what has surprised you? What was different than what you thought before you launched Beyond Burgers into Carl's Jr.?
I think the biggest surprise has been the incrementality of the business. We assumed that we were going to see a bump, but it's been a bump, but a sustained lift for us, which has been great. I think personally, the stories that I've heard mostly on social media have been I haven't been to a Carl's Jr. in 20 years because I became a vegetarian or vegan, and I can have my famous star again, and I haven't had it since I was like 15 years old. And so those are just great stories to hear, is being able to rebuild relationships with customers that we haven't had in a really long time, and for them to come and experience their favorite burger from the past, but in a new form, and still kind of deliver that same flavor. So that to me has probably been the biggest surprise, is the love that we've gotten from consumers out there. We were talking about marketing, and how to best market, our biggest success with marketing the Beyond Famous Star has been with the community. With the community out there through social media, building relationships with social or influencers, et cetera. And when we launched this, we did not put television again. We had no TV advertising. It was PR, it was digital, and it blew up, and it was fantastic. But I think for us, it really is about just getting the backing and the support from consumers. The word of mouth has done extremely well for us and for the success of the product.
I'm going to move to audience questions in a minute. So if you have questions, get them ready. You can interrogate these folks for yourself. But before I do that, Sarah, something that has struck me is that in a lot of the sort of nouveau meat brands, there's just a very intense focus on burgers. But as somebody who has eaten Morningstar for a long time, there's a lot more than burgers. And I'm curious what actual products you all, one, are your biggest sellers, but two, you all see the most opportunity in going forward.
It's a great question and one that I love to talk about. You're right, the portfolio is growing, and what we're seeing is tremendous growth in both chick and breakfast. We've driven over 90% of the chick growth or poultry growth this year. And I think it, again, speaks to bringing more consumers into the franchise or into plant-based eating in total. It gives them a different food format than just the burger. So, we've spoken about chick and then breakfast as a mealtime where consumers really want a strong, savory protein. There's a great alternative for them to try. And so bringing that in where they've had heavier meat-like alternatives has also driven quite a bit of growth.
So I'm going to end my questioning part by asking a question for all of you. When Bruce gave his opening remarks today, he was pretty explicit that the hope is that over time, this category overtakes the animal-based meat category. That the hope is replacement. But right now, there's more meat being sold than ever in America. You have explosive growth in the developing world, steady growth in Europe. My guess is that Carl's Jr. is not selling fewer meat-based burgers, although you can tell me if that is wrong, animal-based burgers. So 10 years from now, do you think it is possible that the curve has bent? Do you think it is possible that fewer people, let's say in America, are eating meat, animal-based meat, and more eating plant-based or cell-based meat?
Sure, I will gladly answer that question. I think we are at a true tipping point, and I think we've only started. And so I think the opportunity to replace and substitute our plant-based alternatives for meat products will happen over the next years because of all of us working together and growing the total pie and portfolio. I think the advances in technology and taste have made it more easy, or nice English, has made it easier to bring consumers back into plant-based eating. It's not just a burger, and doesn't taste badly.
Chuck?
10 years, I think we are at a tipping point. I think we're at an inflection point, and I do think that the curve is just going to steepen. I mean, we see our own velocity accelerating, not flattening out at all. So I do think that in 10 years, you could see a point, if maybe 10 years, maybe a little longer, where plant-based becomes the norm. I can see in the next 20 or 30 years, maybe 30 years, where kids will say, "Hey, remember when your mom and dad ate like actual animals?" Oh my God, So I do think that is a future that we could all see. I may not see because I'll probably be dead, but I'm sure there's some younger people here that might be around. So yeah.
Patty?
I think it's going to be left up to the generations and the future generations and how we bring them up. I think 10 years is probably too soon because I study consumers too, right? Like surround yourself with normal consumers and how did they grow up and then where are they going to be in 10 years? And so for me, it's much more of, I think we're at a tipping point because plant-based is becoming just normal. That kids today, think of your 7, 8, 9-year-olds, it's not confused, it's not weird, it's kind of like, okay, this is another protein. That when they're 20, 30 years old, like Chuck was saying, it's like, I think they're gonna be much more open to it, that you may see the decline of, meat consumption at that time, but it really is about generations and how generations are exposed and educated on diets and the food that they're eating. And so I think that when we think about the younger generation nowadays, it's everyone in this room's opportunity to educate and teach and have products out there that are accessible to. I think one key area that we always forget to talk about, and I know, Chuck, you mentioned it because it's one of your goals, is the cost. And some of us in this room are probably lucky enough to shop at a Whole Foods and be able to afford plant-based proteins. But when you're thinking about the remainder of consumers, average salaries, it really, you can't spend an additional $1 or $2 or $3 for plant-based protein. So I think that's another one that's, it's kind of the elephant in the room that we all have to make sure that we think through, and that it is one of probably the most critical pieces of people not buying it, and not I think the cost has to definitely come down.
All right, let's go to some audience questions. I believe there's a mic floating around, or are we just doing Slido here? Yes, please.
No, I actually have more of a comment, and it's for everybody. Entrepreneurs don't take no for an answer. So I love that all these things are going to have wonderful solutions, because people like you people in this room will not take no for an answer. So I just wanted to share that, and that's the most exciting part about this.
Sir, up here in the front. If you say it, I will repeat it.
Yeah.
Well,
Perfect panel. Thank you so much. I was interested in the decision to launch company-wide rather than tests. And in thinking about new products coming online, what advice do you have for retailers and for providers in terms of the wisdom of sort of going with the CEO's gut versus engaging in the evidence space?
Yeah.
Information on what works.
Sure.
so I'm just going to repeat the question very quickly. The question is, to talk about the trade-offs between testing a new product versus launching it across the entire brand.
Yeah. I have to go, it was truly gut. And I think everyone in the room felt the energy of Ethan and Chuck and some of the information they were sharing. And the reason why we didn't want to test, or we passed on testing, we really don't want to tip our hand either. We are, QSR is very competitive, and we felt it was right. The majority of our locations for Carl's Jr., it's in California, right? The majority of our sales come from there. It is a customer base that's very open to plant-based products, and we wanted to be able to provide something like that. So for us, it kind of felt just the right thing to do for the brand and for our guests, and being able to recapture some of the younger consumers that we had lost. I think from giving some advice in terms of how to market and partnering with suppliers is I mentioned this earlier, is the scalability, is staying true to when you are pitching product to a retailer or to a food restaurant, is making sure that you are ready to scale up. Because I think those were some of the, the bumps on the road that we hit, but we figured out with Beyond. I think the other piece too is lean into people that are vendors of those, I think utilizing, you talk to some of our vendors to make sure, hey, what's the pack size, the distribution channels, et cetera. So even getting an understanding is like, while you may not want to talk to that retailer, it's like talk to some of their distributors and talk to some of their, food processors, because they can give you a lot of advice and ins and outs on how, what happens behind the scenes and what kind of suppliers they're looking for as well.
Yeah, and let me just add one thing to that. First of all, you guys were amazing partners at Carl's, and we spent a lot of time together. They spent a lot of time at our office, in our facilities, in our test kitchens, in our R&D facility. We spent time with you guys. The marketing connections were all there. There was a lot of advanced work to make sure that when you do a full rollout at one time, which is fairly unusual, that all those connection points were buttoned down. So it was a great launch.
Yeah, and the other piece too is you've got to think of who's going to be selling. So our crew, we had to make sure to educate them first. So a lot of our crew, Spanish speaking, making sure that they understood. I believe that your crew, your staff at a restaurant or a store will make or break a product for you. So being able to educate them on what the product is, letting them try it, speaking on behalf of the brand and what it is. Because, we had guests come in and they're like, well, what is this? And we had, FAQs and they were ready and they were able to say, like, I've tried it, this is what it tastes like. So that's an important piece as well, is making sure the people that are actually selling it to your consumers are educated on what it is and what are the benefits.
All right. I'm not sure what happened with Slido, but we have people participating on the live stream, and we have folks in the audience participating by upvoting questions. So we're crowdsourcing the most popular questions. Is it all right if I just read the?
Please, that'd be great.
All right. So the first one is: do you believe that uniting to form a category and fighting for issues such as taxes and legal is a next step, like there exists in dairy, et cetera?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we do. I mean, I think we do have organizations like this in that we are part of and we're contributing to, and we do believe that the category is critical right now in protecting that category. And there are forces, not a lot, but there are forces geared up against us, and we need to collaborate. There are areas where we need to collaborate, and there's areas where we're going to be competitive. And so the answer is yes.
All right. The next most popular question, actually, I just lapped that one. How do you see the growth of online sales, e-commerce, and plant-based products, considering that there is now a younger audience?
It's a great question that I'm happy to go first and have others build on. Plant-based products over-index online. I'm sure that's no surprise to anyone in this room based on millennials and Gen Z. But what you also see is all the different formats of online, whether that be click and collect, order online and through Shipt and Instacart. And what we're really doing is making sure that consumers have the visibility to plant-based offerings with our retail partners and with the third parties to drive that first purchase experience. So I think it's actually the place that you'll see the growth the fastest, and you'll see the household penetration grow faster.
Great, and I will just say, if you're on Slido, vote up the questions, because we're this allows everybody on the live stream to participate and make sure that the people who most want the question asked, we're asking the most popular questions. The next one is: what do you think is the biggest risk of this movement and the greatest development hurdle to really reach the other 95%?
So I think the greatest hurdle is, again, as we've talked about, is taste and food. That is what will make consumers eat something. And then it has to be available, whether that be in quick service or in retail and food service. So I think that has to be a continued focus of this group.
Yeah, education is a big part of it. There's a lot of history in the category that did not appeal to flexitarians. So while our business and our awareness levels are very high right now and growing, our household penetration is still really low. So the consumers who are buying our product are buying lots of it, but there's not enough buying it. So increasing awareness and increasing household penetration are going to be keys.
One of the other most popular questions here, now that we have it up, is what do you think the biggest risk of the movement is to really reach the other 95%? If there's something that's going to happen that's going to keep you from speaking to the meat eaters who you're not being able to speak to right now, what is it?
I mean, I'll repeat kind of what I had said, is like, if we keep assuming that we're only talking to 5% of the people, and that has a lot to do with us categorizing consumers into vegetarians, vegans, flexitarians, et cetera. And, again, we've got to take a step back and say, how do we look at this holistically versus trying to say, this is who we're going after. It's just a paradigm shift, and I don't really know how to kind of put it into words, but for me, it really is about not having to, stereotype consumers or go after a type of consumer. It really is about just selling a great product. People love great products. People love great tasting products, and if you have a great tasting product that's beneficial, they will buy it. Ultimately, the other piece of it too is the accessibility of it. Is it available nationwide? Is it at a good price? And that's the other piece too. The preconceptions is the other piece, but I think that's the risk, is if we continue to talk about consumers in category types, then we're only going to continue to have that 5 to 6 to 10% share. It's never going to grow.
Let me ask about one other that you hear here, which is the perception that, or the belief that these are processed, right? That for the consumers worried about health, there's a connection between people who are worried about health and people who feel that you should be eating natural foods. And well, it seems like something that comes from an animal is natural, and it seems that something that is got a long ingredient list and is made to simulate an animal is not natural. How do you handle that question of artificialness, processedness, and the fears around health that stem from it?
You know, I think we take our nutritionals very seriously and our ingredients very seriously, and it's why we work with, skilled suppliers to make sure that that is the quality that we want in a Morningstar Farms product. We continually renovate and improve upon our products as well, and so I think we look to partnerships in order to continue to address some of these consumer barriers.
Yeah, I'm going to weigh in this one. I'd like to, if you don't mind. Yes, we're processed food, but if you can go to a full whole food based diet, congratulations, it's the best way to go. But the reality is different from the ideal. And I don't know how many people have a only whole food diet. If you had avocado toast this morning, you had a processed food. And so it's very difficult to get there for most people. And by the way, most people aren't even close to getting there. So we provide a transitional food for consumers who want to eat healthier. We believe very strongly that our product is healthier than eating an animal. And we can show that in many ways. There are negatives. I mean, we know that sodium, for instance, is a negative. It is a processed food. There are no artificial ingredients, though. I mean, I will say that, too. We don't use artificial ingredients. I mean, there's also a lot of misconception in social media, and there's also some targeted misconception out there. We do believe that there are organizations that wish us poorly to do not well, that are putting false narratives out in the marketplace. And so we need to combat that, and we are, and maybe as even an association we need to combat that, but there's a lot of negative stuff out there that it's not true. But we are processed food. I mean, yeah.
This question is for Patty. Are you studying putting plant-based mayo or cheese alternatives as an option for vegan consumers in Carl's Jr.?
So we are looking into that. But what we found is that people actually are bringing their own mayo. It's true. So it's interesting. It's like they'll bring in their own mayo or they'll bring in their own slice of vegan cheese. I've seen it in social media and videos. It's great. So we're looking at other proteins for other day parts as well, because I think this is not just about a lunch dinner plate, but also what can we develop for breakfast. So we have looked at it. We have seen consumers just kind of bring in their own stuff and make it vegan or vegan using their vegan ingredients. But for us, it's much more of like, how do we expand this to our breakfast day part?
Just is probably here. And there's actually a follow-up question for you as well, Chuck. Somebody asked, what is the difficulty for adding B12 to your product?
Yeah, we've actually, because we are doing adding vitamins for Canada, there are issues in the way we're looking at it. I mean, we're looking at every way. One of our big imperatives is to improve the healthiness of the product, whether it's low in the sodium, saturated fat, calories, and adding the right vitamins for. So there is no true barrier. It does change the composition of the product. So when we've done it for Canada, for instance, it's been a bit challenging. We just did it for Carl's Jr. in Canada. That was it was a challenge. It's been not as easy. I'm not a scientist, and I know we have 68 scientists back in the office that are working on this stuff, but it is one of the priorities to get there. Yeah.
That is our time. Thank you to Sarah, to Chuck, to Patty for being here.
Thank you. Thank you.